Hey guys, it's Krystal Lee Moore Lucier here, also known as your Home Sweet Home 519 Realtor, Krystal Lee Moore. And this is Realtor Life, a fun and entertaining look at life in the trenches as a real estate professional or entrepreneur in Ontario. And guys, I'm so excited. We have an amazing guest today. This man is fantastic. He is a friend, he is an inspiration. This is Ian Tyson. Welcome, Ian.
Well, thank you, Krystal Lee. So nice to see you, my friend.
Oh, so nice to see you. Thank you so much for taking time this morning to be with us. I'm really excited. So, just some background. I'm going to let Ian kind of answer some great background questions, but Ian, I've seen him speak, unfortunately, only twice in person, and both times he is just captivating and inspirational. But Ian has also a new format that he's going to talk about. A lot of us listen to so many personal growth and inspirational, motivational things, but when you find someone that's able to really captivate that energy, it's everything. So, Ian, please tell us, so how you speak, tell us a bit about yourself and how you got started.
Well, I mean, it was sort of a serpentine route to get me here. It wasn't like, I set out when I'm going to be a motivational speaker. I don't know who actually does that, but I know when I was 12, my dad asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. And at that point, I said I wanted to be a comedian. And my reason being, I wanted to make the whole world laugh because I thought more people needed to.
Yes.
That was sort of my 12-year-old heart. Also, I was obsessed with stand-up comedy at that time. Steve Martin, Robin Williams, George Carlin. They're on the wall behind me here in my office, the
Yes.
albums of the three wise men, as I call them. But I was always obsessed with that. And then in high school, I was sort of a student leadership kid, which exposed me to this larger world of things like leadership conferences and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And I had never, it wasn't a big industry, school motivational speaking per se in the late 80s. There was a few people doing it. And I, in London, in spring of 1989, ran a leadership conference because I was part of this provincial organization that did that
Nice.
for about 250 students at Oak Ridge Secondary. And I was kind of the MC through a lot of it. And, if we had time to kill, I'd tell a story or something like that. And about 2 weeks after that conference, a girl who was on student council at John Paul II in London gave me a call at home because, no email, no internet, and said, "Hey, would you like to come and speak at our school?" And I said, "Why?" And she just said, "Oh, come and tell stories like you did at the conference." And I went, "Oh, okay." And so I went and I sucked. Like it was terrible. I when I think back in horror at that first show. I had no idea what I was doing, no sense of structure. I was babbling on and on and on. But the one thing I very, very clearly remember is there was of that hour, and I think I was only supposed to be 45 minutes, but I went for an hour. The times when people weren't circling up and talking amongst themselves in the audience was I was doing whatever I was doing. I saw them sort of stop and look and lean in and listen. And I went, okay, if you get
Yep.
to do this again, do that.
Yes.
Because I stayed involved with that student leadership organization through university, I went through to be a teacher. I was going to be a high school English teacher. I started picking up gigs doing conferences on the weekends, which would then turn into taking a little trip, doing a couple of schools, things like that. And now we're 35 years later.
So I would say that's really amazing. And congratulations. I think the biggest takeaway for people though is that as amazing as you are today, you had to start somewhere. And like
Yeah.
you said, like if you think back to where you were, I think a lot of people stop themselves before they do anything, whether it's starting a new specialty, a career, a training, because they're like, well, I'm not good. But of course you're not good. You haven't done it yet. Right? Like how many years have you been doing it where you come across and it's smooth and it's awesome, but you had to start somewhere and pay attention to the lessons as you
Yeah.
went through, right?
Well, and I mean, when I came up on the 35th anniversary this past year in 2024, I mean, I was looking at a lot of archival footage, putting things together for my new
Yes.
offering, showing these. I cringe watching even stuff from 5 years ago. I can't. I'm like, oh, I say it so much differently now. I say it so much better than that now. And that I think speaks to that constant learning you're talking about and making yourself better. And
Yeah.
if you don't evolve, then you don't grow.
And it's funny because even when you now, today you is looking and judging, you probably impacted so many people with
Yeah.
that amazing talk. It's just now you're like, okay, but I've grown.
Yes. I mean, I would want all of those people from 5 years ago to come see it now and go, no, it's better now. It's better now. Like I would want that because it's a constant, even if it's the same story they heard, it's
Yes.
me telling it a different way and emoting a different way. And that I somehow on stage in the moment found a turn of phrase
Yeah,
that made it that much more impactful and went, ooh, that's good. And then kept doing it that way. And that's how things grow and evolve.
for sure. Now, one thing I think is really cool. So, when did you make this, like public speaking and empowering, motivating, all of this? When did you make this your career?
Well, I graduated university with my BA in English. And if anybody who's listening or watching knows, applying to teachers college in the early 90s was real difficult because there were so many people applying. The grades went up. So I think I had an 88 average coming out of university. And I think the year I applied, the minimum to get accepted into teachers college was a 92,
Whoa.
which
Okay.
was ridiculous. So I didn't get into teachers college, and
Okay.
so I took a sales job, and three friends of mine and I started a leadership company, and it was there was a summer camp involved and all this stuff, and speaking became a part of it.
Nice.
And I saw that I could make this a job. I mean, I took a few years off from full-time speaking in the late 90s when my kids were little. I would still do a handful of shows every year just to keep my feet in the water.
Yeah.
But I worked in sales and worked for a couple of companies late 90s to the early 2000s and then came back in 2003 and have never looked back. But yeah, it was probably by 94, like after I graduated, it was like, oh, so I can get paid to do this.
That's very
I
cool.
mean, I was getting paid, but usually just expenses and maybe a little stipend. Like I got paid that first gig when I was 18, but they paid me $75.
Yeah, it's not enough to make a career. And I think
No.
that's whatever you're doing, it's like you can get some money, but it's scary. Like even in
Yes.
real estate, it's scary to step out and say, okay, so I have no safety net. It's whatever I earn is what I get, and that's it. And can I
Yeah. I
do
mean,
it?
it's
It's
walking off
okay.
that cliff literally to
Yeah.
go, okay, so it's all up to me now. I mean, it's funny. I've had this a few times where, and I'm sure you'll appreciate this in the entrepreneur world when people like, well, what do you consider your job? Like your job as a speaker? And kind of, yes, but also my job is to find another job. I am constantly looking for the next gig.
Yeah.
And, if there's gaps on the calendar a few months in the future, I'm like, okay, let's go. Gotta
Yeah.
hop to and talk to the agency I have for corporate stuff. And if it's for school shows, then that's on me. And I gotta start. And that's what this is always a slow month in the patterns of my business.
Yeah,
So I'm, actively marketing right now and filling things up for the spring calendar. But that's part of the job. I
for
mean,
sure.
it's funny. I'll go into sometimes I've had the occasion either at a school or a conference or with a business where I'm talking with someone who is involved in the hiring and they're maybe handing the check over and they'll maybe a little sarcastic, maybe with a little bit of bite, say, that's a pretty good hourly rate you got there. And as my friend Scott, a fellow speaker, my buddy Scott Hamill always says, I say, oh no, that I just did, that part's free. I do the show for free. You're paying for 35 years. You're paying for
100%.
all the work I've done. That part I do for free. Because honestly, usually when I'm on stage with a mic in my hand in front of an audience, of these 17 conversations happening in my brain at that time, one of them is a voice going, I can't believe they're going to pay me for this because I'm having so much fun.
Yes. Oh, I love that. And it's really I would argue that, and I like that you said it's like stepping off a cliff, because if you didn't do that, you might not be in this career, right? Like
Yes.
if you were dabbling and you're just keeping it safe by keeping the sales job, would you be able to sustain yourself with jobs that you probably wouldn't necessarily put yourself out because it's not it's not a survival anymore. It's like I like doing it. I'll do it a little, but now
Yes.
you get to be more well known. You're helping more people. You're impacting more people for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, I would think that there's that for a lot of people, and that's the thing that breaks my heart, is there's probably a lot of people out there that have some kind of itch.
Yeah.
There's that itch in their brain of something they like to do, but they
Yeah.
never make it a full thing. And for me, just the itch was always too overwhelming. When I took those sales jobs for about 4 or 5 years when my kids were small, it was honestly the funniest person in London contest in London when we hosted the Canadian Comedy Awards from 2003 to like 2008, I think they were in
Oh,
London.
that's fun.
I entered an amateur stand-up contest because, as I said before, I was always obsessed with stand-up.
Yeah.
And the speaking was always how I'd flexed my comedy muscles. And so I entered into that contest and I won. And that got me back on stage more regularly. And it made me go, yeah, I need to go back to speaking.
Yeah. Well, and you're so comfortable on stage. Like I
Oh,
had said, like I've seen you twice, but you just it's and actually we were talking about that right before we pressed record is having that presence on stage where you're not just speaking, you're engaging everyone.
well, and I appreciate you saying that. That means a lot. And that's something I want to be very intentional about when I'm on stage is,
Absolutely.
when you start and you're younger, like when I was 18 years old and doing this, I wanted laughs. I wanted applause. I wanted to tell some type of emotional story. Ooh, somebody's crying. Ooh, look at that. Like that was always the thing you'd want. Now, what I want more than anything is eyeballs.
Yes.
I want
Yes.
to see, I want you looking at me. And as I have to be reminded, especially with post COVID audiences, which is a real thing.
Yeah.
But another speaker friend of mine, my friend Nick Foley, and he and I talk 3, 4 times a week and always end up talking about craft. His words are always ringing in my head. Silent means engaged. And just because they're not clapping and or uproariously laughing doesn't mean they're not with you. And
Right.
post COVID, I've had to remind myself of that a lot
Yeah.
because people have forgotten how to be an audience.
I think especially yeah, especially with the competition of the cell phone, right? So
Yes.
if you can get someone to know that they can lock in for an hour or so and nothing bad will happen if they don't answer a message or they don't check Facebook for a few minutes, all is good.
Yeah.
Um, but but there are also so many opportunities where people are almost like when it was with COVID, did you have any did you do a lot of presentations online and did you find like when you did your presentations, did you see all the people that were in or was it more you present and there's a list? Because I feel like if you're looking for feedback, that list might not be doing
Well,
it.
it's interesting. There was obviously a bunch of different ways to go with the technology,
Yeah.
and a lot of my speaker friends, it was what we were going to do with this virtual stuff. And there was a,
Right.
a period where clearly nothing was going to happen when we were in lockdown. And I very quickly was able to do a few virtual shows. I mean, with I did one for Awesomepreneurs, and
Yes.
Kevin was involved in that. And
Yes.
that was literally the 30th of March, 2020. So two
Yes.
weeks into lockdown, first virtual show, literally two people. Uh, Jenna Goodhand, our friend,
Yep.
and
I love
and
that.
Kevin were there, and just that was my audience, and it was playing to nothing, and I was trial by fire, but that made me dive into the technology. So there's a whole bunch of different ways you could do it. So the way I ended up doing it was I used a third party software to broadcast as
Cool.
a private link on YouTube for my
Nice.
clients. So
Okay.
I would send them. So for what you were just asking,
Yeah.
I did not see them unless they specifically requested Zoom or Teams. I
Right.
did not see them. I looked
Cool.
at my green light. And so I would be, if it was to a school, for example, they would be broadcasting in the classroom,
Right.
and then I would seed throughout the thing, hey, we're going to do a Q&A at the end. You can put your hand up and you're not going to interrupt me because I can't see you. So if you have a question, please go up and tell your teacher. They can type it into the chat and then I'll answer your question at the end.
Oh,
And so
wow. That must have been fun.
with this software I had, throughout, I would see the little light go on that would say, "Oh, okay, I've got questions," and then I
Nice.
could literally take a question and bring it over on screen with me and
Yes.
be able to say, "Oh, so Stephen in Mrs. Smith's class is asking," and I could talk right to that student.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
so
Okay, that's good.
that was cool. But the not having the audience, not having the feedback was tough.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of long conversations with fellow speaker friends during that time. The mental gymnastics I did to get to a good place in terms of my energy and intention was I tried to think about if I'm doing a show in front of, say, 500 people,
Yeah.
and maybe I'm a half hour into the show, and there's that person midway back in the audience that I wouldn't say was disengaged from the beginning, but they didn't 100% know what was going on.
Okay.
And then about halfway through, you see them get it for the first time, where you see them give an unconscious nod of, "Oh, okay, I get that." And all I want in my speaker brain in that little microsecond is to on mic say, "Can everybody else leave? I just want to talk to you." And I
Nice.
want to clear the room and just
Yes.
say, "The rest of this is for you." And
Yes.
so all I told myself with every virtual show is, as long as I look at that little green light on my computer with intention,
Mm.
I'm not speaking to 1,000 people. I'm
Yeah.
speaking to one person 1,000 times.
Oh, I love that. Yes. That's so good. And that it's so hard. Like, my husband Brett,
Yes.
we were watching, so Brett loves the Trues, and he really brought me into loving the Trues. And during COVID, we were able to buy tickets to an online concert, and they played at the Danforth in Toronto. And they played this, I don't remember the song, but he like just everything, like heart and soul, everything went in. And at the end, he's standing there and he's out of breath. And he's like, and like they panned the empty state. He's like, "This is my worst nightmare."
Yeah.
Like,
Yes. Yeah.
that's what he said. He's like, this is everything that I've ever been afraid of right here. Like I do
Yeah.
everything and not one cheer because they couldn't even have like it was in the middle of the lockdowns. Like they didn't even have a crew, right? It's one
Yeah.
camera behind a screen and I can't yeah, I mean we all pivoted, but it must have been so much like the first time you were in front of an audience again.
Oh,
Did you do like a cartwheel?
I was exhausted because
Oh,
my energy level was so high. My first
yes.
one when I was back, I was like, "Oh my God." It was like I'd had sugar for the first. You see those videos on like TikTok or something of a toddler eating sugar for the first time where they're
Yes.
just demolishing a cake. I was like, "Ah," just like it just hit the veins and I was off and running. And then I was like, "Okay, you gotta calm down or we're not going to get through this." Because the first trip I did, I was in Montreal and they wanted to do smaller assemblies because they were still masking and everything else.
Right.
So I did 3 back-to-back shows
Wow. Okay.
with a smaller audience. And so after the first one, I'm like, "Okay, A, I need something to eat and I got to drink some more water. B, I got to chill out or I'm not going to make it through the day." Because I was on fire, but I was going to burn out real quick if I
Yeah.
didn't watch what I was doing. So yeah,
100%.
but it was something. But I mean, yeah, it was my audience was my nerdy action figures in my office here. Like I just, that was my audience for 2 years. But I did find a lot of joy in it because of that mental gymnastics. And that I think has helped me post COVID to again be looking for those eyes and looking for those nods of recognition are what I want more than anything in the world.
Yes. Okay. Amazing. No, and I love that a lot. I have a question, and this is one where that I'm very curious about.
Okay.
Where would you say is the furthest or coolest place that you have had the opportunity to speak, both virtually, which sometimes opens some different doors, and in person?
Okay, so virtually the furthest was, and again, this was fairly early on. This would have been summer of 2020, I think. So probably the third, maybe virtual show I did at this point
Okay.
was for an international conference that was based in Poland.
Ooh,
And
cool.
so I
Okay.
literally had to get up and I had to send apology notes to my neighbors because I'm in an apartment building, because I had to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to speak.
And go all in.
Yeah, and so be all in and like yell. It's just arms waving and probably banging my feet on the ground and yelling and screaming. And I was
Is
like, my
Ian
poor neighbor's
okay?
upstairs, downstairs, behind me. It's not good. So there were some apologies that went around. So that virtually, um, in person, I've been really fortunate in my career to be able to travel to a lot of cool places and do a lot of cool things. Um, I did a show for a charity in Rio de Janeiro of kids that live in the favelas that are trying to get out of the favelas.
Oh,
So I
cool.
spoke to the high school. They have a
Okay.
high school that they want these kids to go to school, so they send
Oh
buses into the slums to pick them up to bring them to the
my
school.
gosh.
And it was the weirdest thing because they spoke Portuguese and very little English. So I would speak for about 20 seconds, and then they had a kid who was fluent in
Translator.
English beside me. So he was getting all my laughs, which was mildly annoying. Because
Like,
I
I'm
would say something
hilarious.
and get nothing, and then he'd say it and he'd be like, "Oh, like, well, what I just," it was great. And then I got to speak when I was 19 at a conference in Berlin, which was pretty awesome.
Oh, that is
And then the northernmost I've gone, I spoke at a state leadership conference in Alaska, in Barrow, Alaska, which is the northernmost city in North America. It's
wow.
350 miles inside the Arctic Circle.
How long did that
So,
take to get to?
oh, that was total flight because it was Toronto, Vancouver, Vancouver, Seattle, Seattle, Anchorage, Anchorage, Fairbanks, Fairbanks, Barrow.
Well, that does make sense. It is the most direct way.
Yeah. So it was all the way up, but there was a delay. I ended up having to spend a full day in Fairbanks, which was the longest week of my life. And it was, whew, it was rough. Ron White, the comedian, does a whole bit about being trapped in Fairbanks for a day, and that's where that joke came from. He said, "I was trapped in Fairbanks for 24 hours. It was the longest week of my life," and it's yeah, time goes slowly there. But anyway, but yeah, speaking to 500 kids where the hotel I was staying at was the beach was the Arctic Ocean.
Oh
It
boy.
was wild.
That's cool. It's cool though. Like you can now
Yeah,
see
it was
how
very
it's in there,
cool.
right?
Yes.
Like that's
No, I mean, and I've had so many opportunities to speak in beautiful theaters, small crowd. I've had really touching experiences with 10 people for a small little event. And I spoke to 5,500 people at the basketball stadium for the University of Iowa.
that must have been cool.
Well, that was a very quick adjustment of realizing, oh, yeah, I forgot about the way sound travels. Because I
Oh,
said my first thing, got the laugh from the front, and then one, two, and heard the laugh from the upper bowl. I'm like, oh, I gotta account for the delay here because it's taking about a second for my sound to get to them at about a second for them to come back.
that must
They
like
were
the
so far
echo.
away.
That's okay. That's a challenge. I can't handle it when I'm on the phone with someone and I have an echo.
Yeah, oh, it was well, I couldn't hear the echo of me. It took a beat for me to get their laugh.
Oh, okay. That's a bit
But
easier.
again, I had to adjust and be like, okay, give a little beat here, give a little beat. Anyway,
But that's
I've been
part of your craft,
so
right? Where you
yeah,
can
it's part of the
kind of
craft and you
in the
adjust on the
moment.
fly. And I've been so fortunate and I'm so grateful for all of these, adventures I've been able to do. And I can't believe this is my job. I get to go on stage, make people laugh, tell them what I think, and they pay me for it.
So
That's
cool.
pretty great.
Absolutely, it is. Now
Yeah.
you have a new show format that has
Yes.
just launched, and you have a book. Is it just you have the one book?
Yes. I have my one book called Hooray for Everything, The Optimist Manifesto,
Yes, I have
which
your
you
book.
can
Thank you.
and you can only get it on my website. So we'll do plugs or whatever later. But yeah, I when I was crossing that 1 year or 35 year rather anniversary in spring of 2024, there's obviously reflection when you're hitting a benchmark like that. And I just was reflecting on all the material. I mean, I've had several different iterations of stories, several different iterations of entire 1 hour shows over the years. And some of that material I just don't do anymore because things continue to evolve, or this is more for this audience and this is more for this audience. But there's a lot of stories rattling around in my brain. And I just was thinking, I want to change the way I interact with audiences, which partially came out of a stand-up show that I watched where he talked about changing the way, and I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to change the way I interact with an audience.
Nice.
And I happened to be out in New Brunswick speaking and having lunch with a couple of friends who own a software company called Dovico. And they had a new product, a software called Show Up, which they were, bragging about rightfully. It's their company and telling me about Show Up. And they say, yeah, it's kind of cool. So if somebody's giving a presentation for a business or whatever, like a budget meeting or a staff meeting, people on their phones or on their computers can give live anonymous feedback to just the speaker, and just the speaker will see it. And I was like, A, that's interesting. B, that's horrifying and would never want that in what I'm doing. But C, and the question, because of that itch in my brain of
Yeah.
changing the way I interact, I said, hey, hang on a second. Could you, with this technology, instead of it being live anonymous feedback, could it be binary choices? And could we connect those choices? Because the first thought that went into my head was choose your own adventure book.
Yes, I feel like
That,
if you're too old, if you're too young to know what choose your own adventure, that's sad for you.
that's sad.
But
You got to go
such
find
a
some used choose your own adventure
right?
books.
I love choose your own adventure.
That it we come to a turning point and here are three choices. What
Yes.
so I the format I came up with in working for 8 months with their design team, they literally designed a whole other element of Show Up for what I'm doing, which is
So
now
cool.
available for companies to use, which is great. They call it a conditional conversation. So I build out the slides for my show, which I'm normally not a slide guy, but the slides are just choices.
Yeah.
So I come up and warm up the crowd and do like a singular story and then say, okay, the rest is up to you. They then follow a QR code on their phones. It takes them to our conversation, which is my presentation, and they are given three choices that are on the screen behind me and on their phones. Do you want me to talk about A, B, or C? They make the choice. The line goes up in real time on the screen, and then whatever they choose. So if they choose A, it's going to go to maybe slide number 4. If they choose B, it's going to go to slide 5. If they choose C, it's going to go to slide. And so dozens of possible combinations.
So
And
cool.
I literally, after that first choice, I have no idea where it's going to go.
It was exciting for you too,
Oh
right? That's
God, yes. Creatively, I am thrilled by it, and that all the test shows that I did, the launch that
yep.
you and Brett were able to come to in December, which I can't thank you enough for coming to. It meant a lot to me to have you two
We
there.
loved it.
Um, it was just to be able to go, oh, okay, so that's the story we're doing. Well, I haven't done that on stage in about 7 or 8 years, so let's
Let's see
go.
how it goes.
And I
So
love it.
cool. It
And
was,
then
I found, sorry, I just wanted to,
no, go
so I
please.
found it was cool to vote. And to your point before like what when we were talking just before, um, the, like we had it maybe on a lower level, or maybe only I had it on a lower level, but the competition feeling where you're like, you want your
Yes.
story to win and like the excitement, it's true because yeah, like I was really excited when my story won, and I was a little disappointed when my story didn't win, but all of your material is so great that I think it's cool to have everyone engage. Like it's an extra level of engagement.
Yeah, well, and that's what I was looking for. And I wanted people to be invested in the stories that I was telling.
Yeah.
And I wanted one of the things that's really been important to me in my material that I've talked about in a number of different ways for, say, the last 8, 10 years is choices. Choices is something I talk about a lot, and the power of choices and how
Yeah.
our choices really build our own lives. And people tend to sometimes just give away these choices and let other people be in charge.
Yeah.
So I want to remind people of the power of their choices by of the hour that I'll do through this live voting and this conditional conversation using Show Up. 45 to 50 minutes of that hour is up to the audience, not
So
me. I
cool.
do that opening story, and then I've got my challenge then becomes tie it all together at the end.
Yeah.
And that, which again, I love and relish that challenge because
Yeah.
that's creatively fun for me. But they built the show, and every time I've done it so far, it's been a different show. And it's never going to be the same show. I mean, I may have an opportunity where I'm at a school or a conference or something, and or at a business where I'm doing maybe a couple of back-to-back shows, and
Yeah.
it'll be fascinating that this group chose this group chose this, and it's going to be a different path every time. And so I'm excited about that. And I'm
Yeah.
excited to for the clients that I work with for them to be kind of reminded about the power of their choices too.
That's really cool. I love that. Now, so how can, so you have your website, and then how
Yes.
can people, so for entrepreneurs and real estate professionals, if they wanted to come to one of your shows or get in touch with you or get one of your books, like what's the best way to go about that?
So the best way to get in touch with me, iantyson.ca,
Okay.
not .com. Recently passed Canadian country singer. Don't want to go to that website. It'll be very sad. Iantyson.ca is where you find me, and it's got stuff for corporate, stuff for schools, and stuff for cooking, because I'm also mildly obsessed with cooking and do a bunch of stuff that way.
Amazing.
So that's all in there. That also then links to my socials at Ian Tyson on Instagram, easiest place to find me. Ian Tyson Speaker on LinkedIn, on Facebook, all of that. All those links are on my website. And then my email, which is also on my website, is hire, HIRE _ME. So hire me at iantyson.ca. It's just desperate enough. And People
Clarity
get in
is
touch with
power.
that. It's yeah, it's you gotta, that's what's the big thing in sales, Krystal. You gotta ask, right?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
I'm asking with my email. The type of show like I did with the launch, like a public theater
Yeah.
type show, isn't something I've done that often. I don't know if more will be coming, but all of that would always be on my socials or on my website. I know that working with entrepreneurs, with people, with an industry like real estate has always been a good crowd for me,
Yes.
because they're in sales and because they're, strong and motivated people, and usually like what I have. So, things like team meetings or conferences for real estate professionals or something I'm always looking for. And so, yeah, people can reach out that way. And, I've started doing some coaching, one-on-one coaching with people who want to speak more about building. I obsess not about the sales end of it, but about the craft
Yes.
and building their hour, connecting their stories, finding the most impact, what their intention is. I obsess about that. And it's something I shied away from for a lot of years, but I
Yeah.
have a couple of clients now that I'm working with in building out and starting their careers to be a speaker. So lots of stuff happening, and
The one
just
thing, Ian,
people.
sorry, just to sort of cut you off, but as far as like, and I like that you are coaching people to actually be speakers, but I think sometimes what people, especially in real estate or any field of entrepreneur, forget is that you kind of have to have some speaking experience and confidence, because every single time, it might not be an hour, but every single time you're sitting in front of a new client or a lead or a prospect, you are, there is a presentation involved. So if you don't have that comfort, so even something like that would be a great idea.
Yeah. Well, I
Um,
mean, maybe that's you and I can do a collab for real estate agents on a public
yeah,
speaking type of seminar.
that'd
I'm
be
thrilled
cool.
with stuff like that. Like because again, the little nuances of the craft of this, I obsess over, and
Love that.
of having even because it is a sales thing. I think back to when I used to wait tables when I was in university, and that was a presentational job. And I would have my little one-liners, my little jokes, my little stories I'd tell about the food, and that stuff got me more tips, which is essentially the
Yeah,
sales part of it.
yeah,
And real estate's a presentational job, and
yeah.
I'm obsessed with presentations. Yeah, if anybody wants to have a conversation about that,
Love
I'm
that.
there for it.
Love that. So iantyson.ca, at Ian Tyson on Instagram and
Instagram, Twitter, though I'm not really on there much anymore because yeah,
X. Yeah, I was on Twitter when it was a bird.
yeah. I refuse to call it X. It's not happening.
I love that. Stand
Yeah.
your ground.
Yes, I there's a line in the sand, and that is it.
I hear you. I'm over here with you because I have not downloaded it.
Excellent.
Ian, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thank you for having me. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you. Everyone, thank you for listening. I'm Krystal Lee Moore Lucier, also known as your Home Sweet Home 519 Realtor, Krystal Lee Moore. This is Realtor Life. Thanks so much for joining us today.